Hello, Michelle again, back with the Toltec Mounds book. We're going to talk today about chapters 10 and 12, which I realize is a little weird, but chapter 11 is about Mound B, and that's one of the really big mounds, so it's a really long chapter, whereas chapters 10 and 12 are a little bit shorter, so I figured we could combine them a little bit easier. And honestly, a lot of this is the same stuff we've been seeing in the other mounds, so we'll go through really quick. It's Mound E and Mound C. Talk about what Dr. Rolingson said about these guys, and then we'll talk about Mound B, kind of the last big mound that's had excavations done out there next week. So Mound E, chapter 10, it's not very visible on the surface. It's a slight rise, and it was cut on the northwest side by an old road. So it's damaged as well. It's also been plowed over quite a lot, so not super easy to see, but you can see it on the map that I showed. So they disked it up when the state bought the property, and then did a surface collection, but they didn't find a ton of artifacts in that surface collection, and the speculation is that this was a pretty heavily collected area, so there weren't a lot of artifacts still on the surface to be found. So then in 1979 they did an actual excavation. They excavated 4 1x2 meter units in the area of the mound, and they found some small pits and some post holes underneath what would have been the mound surface. So there was some kind of construction underneath there. And they did see in the walls of the units as well evidence of basket loading, so there's different colors of soil being piled up. And they saw this again all over an existing midden surface, which is what we've seen in a lot of the other mounds that we've talked about. And in that existing midden surface, that previous ground level, there were a lot of artifacts in that midden, which makes sense. That was covered up. That wouldn't have been exposed to people collecting over the years. Interestingly, they did do flotation on some of the samples from here, and they found a lot of those southeastern ceremonial complex crops that we think of. So little barley, the type X, kind of unknown native grass, and maygrass as well. Pottery, again, a lot of the same kind of stuff they were seeing, but some interesting standouts are they have a circular and square-based Baytown jars. So that's 2 separate jars, not the same jar, and not whole jars, but there's enough of the base to tell that some of them are circular and some of them are square-based, so that's kind of neat. And then also they found 5 disc sherds, so that's pottery sherds that are like circular, and many of them had a hole drilled through the center, and there are a couple that were broken, so they think there was probably a hole drilled through it, but you can't tell for sure. But they were purposely shaped into circles after the pottery was broken, so that's kind of an interesting thing. Lithics, again, a lot of the same stuff: arrow points, knives, bifaces, expedient tools, which means something made like on a flake. Most made from river cobbles, but again, some novaculite is showing up, probably from quarrying in southwest Arkansas. Bone, interestingly, there was some engraved shell and a bone pin. So those are kind of standouts, but then, you know, some food remains as well, just like we've seen before. So this mound does date to the late 900s CE, which makes it a little bit later than Mounds S and G, which we've talked about before. But we have to remember that that is based on the midden surface underneath for the most part, because that's where they found many of the artifacts, and the artifacts date to the woodland period. So it's all generally contemporary, but we've got little bits of different time periods in there as well, so that's kind of cool. So that's basically it about Mound E. Hard to see on the surface, but there is some stuff there, but more work needs to be done, just like kind of everywhere, which is why we're going back. So now we're gonna switch over and talk about Mound C. All right, so Mound C is actually the 3rd highest mound on the site, and yet it is still pretty dwarfed by Mounds A and B. It is about 4.2 meters tall, which is 12 to 13 feet tall. So you can see it, but it doesn't really compare to those really big ones. And it's also been very damaged by farming, just like everything else out there. You could plow over it, and that has spread the mound across the surface farther. They do know that there were houses and sheds near the mound for some amount of time, kind of based on records and aerial photographs and other things. They think those buildings were there between 1882 to 1958, somewhere in that time frame, and they were on the southwest side of the mound. So the work at this mound was done in 1966. They did a society training program through the University of Arkansas Museum to investigate Mound C. There was a pothole from looting in the top of the mound, and so they expanded that to really get a look into the mound because it's kind of on the top center of the mound. I'll show you a picture of the excavation units that they set out, and that's on there. So they did see in those profile walls that there's basket loading in Mound C as well, which we could kind of expect, but they did not take this unit all the way to the bottom. I said this mound was 12 feet tall. That would be a deep unit, so kind of dangerous. They didn't go all the way down, but they did excavation units out to the side so they could see more of the construction and the initial layers. So Mound C did turn out to probably be a burial mound, and so they did find some burials out there while they were excavating. There were 3 that were uncovered in the excavation units that were set out. One was kind of toward the bottom of the slope, and then 2 more were upslope of that, but still not all the way to the top of the mound. So they uncovered 1 child, 1 adult male, and 1 probable adult female burial. Interestingly, there didn't seem to be any similarities in how these people were buried or directionality that they were facing or anything like that. They didn't seem to be buried necessarily with any artifacts. There were a couple of artifacts found with the adult male and or the child, but it was kind of a mixed context. So it's unclear if those were meant to be with one of those burials or if they were just in the midden. So based on these 3 burials that were excavated by archaeologists from the museum and then reports of many other burials being in this general location, it's hypothesized by Rolingson and others that this was probably an accretional burial mound, which essentially means that it built up over time. So people were buried there, soil was put on top, more people were buried there later, and it became a mound over time. It's not a burial place for one specific person. Many people were likely buried in this mound. And so after this work, no more work has been done on Mound C. But the work that they did do, they did find quite a lot of midden, as I said. Some of these were mixed contexts and things. So there were a lot of pottery and lithics, all of the same woodland types that we've been talking about in the other mounds that we've seen so far. There were only 6 shell-tempered sherds, so this probably wasn't reused later as a Mississippian burial place. This is a woodland burial mound. So there was 1 quartz arrow point and 1 perforated pottery disc found near the child burial, which was near the adult male burial in the mound. And again, we're not positive that those are associated because of kind of some of the context that was going on in that unit, and that things might have been dug in different times. But because all of this, the human remains and the burial goods are at the museum, they have all been repatriated back to the Quapaw Nation. So while we have some information about these burials in this book, all of that has been repatriated to the tribes of the descendants of these people to take care of as they find fitting for those remains. So kind of brief overview again of Mounds C and E, chapters 10 and 12, and we'll talk about the big mound, Mound B, next week, and the little bit of excavation work that's been done in there. So we're kind of wrapping up on this. I hope you've been enjoying it. This was kind of interesting to see these 2 mounds and see how pretty similar they are to the previous mounds that we've talked about, even though they have their little bit of individual characteristics as well. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.